Hey everybody, Joe Kokoza here, and welcome to the Pod Diver Lodge. On this week's episode of Pod Diver TV, I have a really special interview with Master Chief Petty Officer and U.S. Navy Master Diver Rick Betua. Now, Rick's author of the book Breathe, a Master Diver's Tales of Survival. Now, this is a book so good, a diving book that is so good I read it twice. Now, it was an honor to actually talk with Rick and interview him. Rick, in addition to being a Navy Master Diver, is also an accomplished free diver and spear fisherman. He was the youngest Master Diver in U.S. Navy history. His story is the story of courage, devotion to duty, a tragedy, and the spirit of never, ever, ever, ever quitting. So without further ado, let's roll that interview I did with Master Chief Petty Officer and Master Diver Rick Betua. Hey everybody, Joe Kokoza here, and I'm sitting here. He's actually down under, and I'm here in Florida, but with retired Master Chief, Master Diver, USN, Rick Betua. Hey Rick, how's it going down there in Australia?
Oh, very good, thank you. How you doing, Joe?
Good. A few years back, I got to read Rick's book, Breathe, which is basically his story as a U.S. Navy diver. It also talks about his experience as a free diving spear fisherman. Today we're going to talk about basically how he became a Navy diver and what was his inspiration. So, Rick, let's talk a little bit about this, because in your book you go into how when you were a kid in Florida, you were a teenager basically spearing fish.
Yes, that's correct. Actually, even before I was a teenager, I think I started spearfishing at 9 years old. I befriended a young couple, Johnny and Elaine Clement, and they sort of adopted me. And every time they would go diving, they would drag me with them. And so he got me started on the right foot from a very early age.
But what was you said, I read this in your book, and it was a great story, your inspiration as a teen to think about, I want to be a Navy diver?
Well, that happened on Super Bowl Sunday in America. I think it was 1973. I remember the Miami Dolphins, I think, were playing the Vikings. And I wasn't really big into football back in those days, but I liked the halftime shows. And this particular year, during halftime, Budweiser beer had a This Bud's for You, Navy divers. Now, back in those days, Budweiser was doing This Bud's for You for, say, coal miners. But this particular year, they had this Bud's for You, Navy divers. And it was two Navy divers going down and actually blowing up a pipeline. And I jumped up, popcorn went flying. I said, I want to do that. And my dad just laughed and said, I bet you will. And my mom said, absolutely not. It's too dangerous. But I kept hounding my dad to take me to the recruiter, even though I was only 12 years old at the time. And finally, he gave in. He brought me to a recruiter, and the recruiter happened to be a UDT frogman. And he said to me, what do you want to be? You want to be a frogman, or do you want to be a Navy diver? And I said, me and my father said, we don't understand the difference. He goes, it's very, very, very simple. Do you see yourself wanting to kill people for a living, or are you going into this just from the diving aspect? I said, I looked at my father, and we both looked at the recruiter and said, no to the killing, and that I just wanted to be a diver. And so the frogman gave me the PT test, and he goes, if you could do anything or get ready to do anything, make sure you can do this PT test, because only about 25% of the people that take this test will pass the test. So I had 5 years to get ready to take that test, and I got really good at that test, and it helped me a lot, especially going to dive school. Because just prior to going to dive school, I green stuck a couple rigs and I was injured, but even injured, I passed the test. So you enlisted at the age of 17 years old, is that correct? That's correct. My parents had to sign me away.
Okay, so, and where'd you go to boot?
I went to boot camp in Orlando.
Oh, okay.
And then I went to my A school, which was gas turbine mechanical up in Great Lakes, Illinois.
Because back in the day, correct me if I'm wrong, Navy diving wasn't a rate. They selected from various source ratings. You couldn't go in originally as a Navy diver, is that correct?
That is correct. So you had to come in, go through boot camp, select an authorized rating, and then go to that school. And then after that school, you would get sent to your first ship or first command. And then from there, you would have to strike out. And when I say strike out, it means get qualified on board that ship, get qualified in your rating, and all aspects of everything on board the ship. So that typically takes several years to do it. And if you were lucky, you got to either BUDS or you got to Navy Dive School in 3 to 4 years.
Okay, so you were kind of like, well, you tell us your story, because I read your book, so I kind of know where it goes, but you were a very highly motivated sailor and wanted to get to dive school as soon as possible. How did you do that?
Well, I was the youngest person on board the ship, first of all, so everybody really looked after me. I was like their little brother. I looked like a little kid amongst all of them. And when I first reported the ship, I let my department head and the captain know that I was ready to be a diver. And they said, you're not going anywhere. Gas turbine mechanical is they're in critical shortage, and you're not going anywhere. So we went on a Mediterranean cruise, and then we came back, and we were supposed to be home for a while, but we got sent on a Unitas cruise straight away. So my thought process was, listen, I'm never going to get to dive school because no one's going to let me do it. So I basically got the forms, filled out the forms myself. I signed my captain's name to them, and I asked for the day off. And because I was in Norfolk, I jumped on my motorcycle, drove up to Washington, D.C., walked into the Pentagon. It's massive, just a massive, massive building. And I walked in and saw the diving detailer, who at the time was a Master Chief named Mad Dog Reynolds. And
he was a Master Chief diver, correct?
Master Chief, Master Diver, and he was our detailer. And I handed him my package, and he says, "You look pretty fit." And I said, "I'm doing my best." And he said, "Do you think you can pass the PT test?" I said, "Yes, sir." I said, "I've been practicing that PT test for 5 years." He goes, "What do you mean?" And so I told him the story about visiting a frogman 5 years earlier. And so he goes, "Okay, I'll let you know." And when my ship was in Rio de Janeiro on that Unitas cruise, my orders came in to attend dive school. And then I was summoned to the captain's cabin, and on board at the time we also had the Commodore. So, when you get your name is passed on 1MC for Petty Officer Patua, lay to the captain's cabin, you know you're in trouble. And,
explain what lay to means rather than just report to.
Lay to simply means move your ass.
Okay.
Okay. So I ran up there, I knocked on the door, I walked inside, I was at attention, and the captain was just livid. And he was just red in the face, and he's like, "I want to know how you did this." And I of course, figured out that, hey, I was caught. So I'm sure I had tears in my eyes, and I was only, barely 18. He was quite upset at me. And I wouldn't say anything. I couldn't say anything. And finally, the Commodore, who was sitting behind the captain, said, "Petty Officer Patua, just tell him how you did it." And I told him that I came in the Navy to be a diver. I was a diver before I came in the Navy, and it was my whole dream to be a diver. And then once I got to his ship, he wouldn't allow me to be a diver. So I got all the paperwork together, I filled it out to the best of my ability, and I signed his name to it, and I brought it up, and I gave it to the detailer. And then there was this long period of silence. And you could see, though, although the captain lost his temper, he was like, "I'm mad at him, but should I really be that mad at him?" So the first thing that happened was the Commodore started laughing. And then the captain started laughing. And then the captain stood up, put his hand out, shake my hand. He goes, "The way I figure it, you will graduate dive school before we get back to Norfolk from this Unitas cruise. What you owe me is to be on the pier in Norfolk and tie up my number 1 line and come aboard and shake my hand." I said, "Yes, sir." And he held on to my hand, and he said, he looked me in the eye and he said, "Patua." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Don't ever forget, a deal is a deal." Well, that motto stayed with me for 30-something years. And anytime I talked to one of my men and I made a deal with them, I would say the same thing to them. So that was something that I learned from an early age, and I kept it with me my entire career.
Wow. A deal is a deal.
A deal is a deal.
That's a good one of your first lessons in leadership, I guess. So let's talk about becoming a Navy diver. Let's talk about the process of training. You had the PT. You've been doing that for 5 years, prepping for that. But you had sort of a glitch, like the weekend before your when you reported for dive school. What
Yes.
was?
So I flew back from Rio de Janeiro, and I had a little bit of time off before dive school. So I jumped on my motorcycle, drove up to Connecticut as fast as I could, saw all my family, and then drove back. No incidents. Then the morning came where I needed to report to dive school, or at least take my package over to them. And it was a Friday afternoon, and we were starting school on Tuesday. I had my uniform on, my Cracker Jack whites, and I was on the motorcycle, and I was actually on the base, only doing about 30 miles an hour, and somebody ran a stoplight and hit me, and there was an accident. Didn't break, but I green stuck some ribs, and it was really, really painful to breathe, and I had the PT test in just a few days. So I got back on my motorcycle, left the scene, told them I didn't want to write a report, and I went to dive school and handed in my package. Now imagine I was in dress whites, and so my elbows and my knees the blood was bleeding through, and so there was a young officer on the quarterdeck, and I handed her my package, and so what happened to you? I said, I just got in a minor motorcycle accident, and he said, well, your PT test is Tuesday morning. Good luck with that. Well, what I did was I drove from Norfolk down to North Carolina to a hospital just over the state line because I didn't want anyone to know. And I went in and I said, hey, I had an accident and my ribs hurt, and they did x-ray, and the doctor told me you green stuck some ribs. And I said, oh, I got to take a PT test in 3 days. And he asked me what it was about, and I told him. And he goes, it's impossible. You won't be able to do that. And, I'm sure I got upset. And the doctor said, well, you know what? I'll give you something to take the edge off, and the rest will be up to you. So 3 days later, 100 of us showed up at Norfolk Naval Base. And of those 100, I remember there was 99 men and one woman. When the day was over and the PT test was done, only 16 of us passed. 15 men and that one woman. And so we didn't have enough people to start a class. So there was several UDT teams at the amphibious base, and 9 frogmen volunteered to join our class because they wanted to learn how to dive better than what they did previously. So they joined our class, and our class was complete at 25.
Wow. So you basically went through dive school with cracked ribs.
Well, they weren't cracked.
How are doing pull-ups? I mean, pull-ups.
Pull-ups were the worst, for sure. But they weren't cracked. They were green stuck. Green stick means basically the muscle in meat that's on the rib is separated from the bone itself. So although they're not broke, they're extremely sore.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you got through dive school. Tell us about that story about, I guess it was a swim test between you and the frogs in your dive school.
Well, it wasn't between me and the frogs. It was the entire class, but it was middle of winter. So the bay that we swam on at NAB was covered in ice. Mm-hmm. So they brought a boat in, they cracked up the ice, and we did our 1,000-meter swim, 1,000-yard swim. And, of course, all the frogs.
Were you in dry suits for that?
No. We were only in wetsuit tops, only wetsuit jackets.
Okay.
And, to be honest with you, I never really got cold. We were working hard to swim as fast as we could, so you don't really get cold if you're working hard. So, of course, all of the sailors, we came in last, and the 9 frogs, they came in first. And so we had this really tough master diver. His name was Starcher, and Master Diver Starcher. He had 30-something years in, and I could hear him bellowing, "You telling me we don't have a sailor boy that can beat those frogs?" And they said, maybe Batua, but we had buddy lines between us, so I could only swim as fast as my partner. And I remember Starcher calling me up. He said, "Can you beat them frogs?" I said, "I'll give it a try, Master Chief." And he goes, I said, "But I need to be untethered, and I want to wear the same fins as they're wearing." He goes, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Well, we're wearing different fins. The frogs are wearing duck feet, and we're wearing rocket fins. I want to wear the same fins that they wear." And he goes, "Okay." So the very next day, we did the swim test, and when they said go meant go. And Yeah, I was the first person back. Some of the frogs complained about it, and it wasn't like them to complain. I really enjoyed having the frogs in our class, but it wasn't like they said, "Oh, the only reason Ricky won was because he was untethered. Untether us too, and we'll beat him." And Starcher was not a man to be messed with. So he said, "Oh yeah?" He goes, "Get him back in the water right now." He didn't wait till the next day. We're going to finish. We're going to figure this out right now. So all the other sailors, Navy sailors, they wanted no part of it. And I remember one of the frogs wanted no part of it. He goes, it was my friend Art, and we were about the same size, and we hung out quite a bit in school. And he goes, "I want no part of this because I already know Ricky's faster than me." So I got in the water with the 8 frogs, and Master Chief said, "On my mark, go." And I beat him again. And when we crawled up on the pier, I mean, the frogs were great. I loved them. Every one of them came up to me and shook my hand and said, "Good job, Ricky." There was no animosity. There was nothing like that. They just
a good friendly
admired me
competition.
because, then they all asked me, "How come you're so fast in the water?" And I was like, "Oh, since I was 9 years old, I've been chasing fish." And then kind of everybody, anyways, That's the story.
That's a great story. So you did graduate and you went to the fleet. What was it like your first few assignments as a Navy diver?
Well, my first command was the USS Sierra. It's a destroyer tender, and it's stationed in Charleston, South Carolina, and it's in the Cooper River. Cooper River has zero visibility. It's much like the Mississippi, and right after I got on board, they augmented our ship with women, and about 200 or 300 women were placed on board our ship.
Now, there was an incident with, I guess, a criminal incident, and NCIS got involved, and you actually helped with a criminal investigation on your ship. You want to talk about that story?
Sure. What happened was one particular weekend, I was the duty diver and also the duty driver, and a young lady was raped on board the ship by a sailor, and somebody else, another sailor, saw him throw something off the ship. So I was summoned to the wardroom about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they said that we needed to look for this item. And I explained to them, I said, well, the bottom is littered with material that the Navy's been throwing in the ocean for 100 years, and there's absolutely zero visibility. So this would be like finding a needle in a haystack or worse. And the XO said, yes, but Petty Officer Batua, you're right. However, that young lady deserves your honest look to see if you can find it. So I said, roger that, sir. So I called the dive team in. It's probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning by this point. And they said, Ricky, you're diving. We put the individual on the ship that saw him throw it, and basically he stayed up on the ship with a radio and said, right there. And we anchored the boat in a 2-point moor, exactly where he told us. And back in those days, we were wearing KMB bandmasts. So I put my bandmasts down. I do my topside checks. I hop in the water. I do my in-water checks. And now I'm leaving the surface, and there's absolutely zero visibility. So as I'm going down, probably right around 40 feet or 45 feet. The water becomes heavy, and it's because of the mud, all the mud on the bottom. It's almost like soup. And then finally you touch down, and the moment I touched down, I kneeled. And something was underneath my knee, and I reached underneath my knee, and I could feel a package about the size of a football, and I could tell it was closed, and I could tell inside there was a knife. And I said, topside red, job complete, coming up red. And they were like, get the fuck out, Ricky. And I was like, no, I got it, I'm pretty sure. I said, I got a package about the size of a football. It feels like closed, and I can tell there's a knife that's open inside, or it's a straight knife. And they were like, roger that, get ready to come up. So because I had boots on, because I was searching the bottom, I was at their mercy to pull me up. And the moment they started pulling me up, something was cutting into my neck. I was like, hold red, lower me back down. And there was this massive industrial bandsaw blade that was cutting into my neck. So as I took it off my helmet and off of me, I felt something touch my forearm, and there must have been a jagged piece of metal there from something else. But I could tell that it pierced my arm because my skin was up like this on the back side. And I said, Then I told Topside read, you better get a medic. And I was like, what? I said, I'm pretty sure a piece of metal pierced my arm, and I'm going to have to hold it. And so what I did was I put the package underneath my right arm, and then I used my right hand to pinch that spot, and they pulled me up. And then once they got me on board the vessel, the corpsman was screaming for me to let go, and when I let go, blood was spurting, I hit an artery. And anyways, make a long story short, we take that package back over to the pier. The executive officer and NIS was there, and then they took me to the hospital.
Wow. And whatever happened to the perpetrator who committed that sexual assault?
Well, because he committed a sexual assault, which is and he did it on federal property, and he used a dangerous weapon. He got life in prison. He's still in prison.
Wow. Wow. So that's kind of like that's an interesting introduction to being a Navy diver. So in that regard, maybe clear up some misconceptions that the general public has. What is the actual duties of a Navy diver? And I mean, I know there's a lot of different things, and it's evolved over the last 30, 40 years, but specifically, what are the duties and missions of U.S. Navy diving?
Well, the duties are very vast. It really depends on what command you're at. So, I mean, we do everything from ship's husbandry. So we do ship's husbandry on submarines, ship's husbandry on our ships, and then we could be stationed with SEAL teams and swimmer delivery vehicles. We could be stationed with other special teams and other in our other sister services. We also at the time we had Navy divers stationed on diving, rescue, and salvage ships like ARSs and ASRs. So the job profile was very, very vast. And typically we do 3 hard years or arduous years, and then we do 3 easy years. So we might be on a ship for 3 years as a diver and deploying, and then we might ask for instance, I want to be an instructor for 3 years. And then after we were an instructor for 3 years, then we go to another arduous command. But it's typically 1 arduous command, 1 easy command. And that's the way it was until the global war on terrorism, and then everything changed after that. So instead of 3 and 3, our cycles got much quicker, because also at the same time when we started the GWAT in 92, 93, the President of the United States at the time reduced our Navy from 600 ships to 400 ships, and also reduced our Navy from 600,000 personnel to 400,000 personnel. So of course those 400,000 personnel have to do the same mission that the 600,000 personnel did. So that means we're deploying twice as much as we did in the past. And most people don't think about this, but the impact of that was Navy divers and SEALs and EOD. We had a 99% divorce rate, and it was because we were doing back-to-back arduous periods, and we weren't home to see our family. I mean, it really affected the military for quite some time.
You did mention before, like, some of the work you did with submarines. I remember in the book there was a story about you and Groton. You talk about diving in cold water. You were diving around, and also in the book you mentioned how dangerous it was to dive around submarines and getting all the lockouts and stuff. Can you tell us about that story where you and your guys were, like, I guess, testing the security of the Marines on base?
Sure, no problem. That was back in the days when Marines used to guard the base. A lot of people don't know, but Groton, Connecticut, back in those days there was 36 submarines in port, especially at Christmas time. So,
and at this point, sorry, Rick, but at this point, we forgot to mention this. You had moved up. Were you a first class diver at this time, or were you in charge of the team?
I was in charge of the team, and I was a first class diver, and I was probably at that time a first class petty officer. The base security officer wanted to test the Marines' response to an intrusion, and it was in the middle of winter. It was such in the middle of winter that tugboats had to constantly break up the ice for us to get in. And we launched from a point straight across the base, and my job was to go to a submarine that was in what we call cold plant, which means a nuclear reactor was deactivated and the MSW, main seawater pumps, weren't running, and it was all tagged out. So we were coming in to a submarine that was at cold plant, so we couldn't get hurt. Anyways, we crossed the the river underneath the ice, and we got to the submarine, but we could not get through the ice. I tried the rear of the submarine by the turtleback, and I tried the sonar dome, and I could not get through. And there was myself and three other divers. So what happened when I couldn't get through the ice, and then one of my divers was showing me that he was getting low on air. I sort of did the unthinkable. So what I did is we swam back to the middle of the ship, which is midships, and I knew that the reactor compartment was there. And what we did was we just swam at a 90-degree angle from that to hit the next submarine on the next pier. That submarine I knew was lit off, and so there was no way the ice could form around the nuclear area of the submarine, so it would be like slush and we would be able to come through the ice. So instead of arriving on the ship that was in coal plant, we arrived on a ship that was lit off, and the reactor was active, and of course the guards that were on the ship weren't in tune to what was happening, so they drew their weapons on us. The base called a security alert. The Marines came down, and then of course they got us out of the water, and yeah, that didn't go real smooth either. But anyways, we all made it.
Adapt to you have to adapt to the circumstances and explain for people who don't know, which is probably most people, the dangers of going near a submarine that's active, the reactors going, and all that stuff. All the dangers of diving near it. Yeah.
There's many things on a submarine that can kill you. The sonar dome, for instance. Sonar. If they activate their sonar any more than 10%,
one ping. Yeah,
exactly. It's enough to damage or kill us. Main seawater pumps are massive things, about 4 or 5 feet in diameter, and they keep the nuclear reactor cool. And they suck so much water that they can suck a diver right up to the hull, and in doing so can kill them. Then we got secondary propulsion motors that can kill you, a propeller that can kill you. There's a lot of things on a submarine that can kill you.
Okay. So we've got up to like your, and I'm going to highly recommend your book because you go into a lot of these stories of what it was like, but you had a very, I would say, fast career moving up the ranks. And weren't you the youngest? Well, we're going to get into your background and how you became a master diver and a master chief. But didn't you spend more time as an E9 than an E1 through E8?
That is correct. So I became a master chief, I think, in 13 or 14 years. And, the military, everyone thinks the military is hard, and it is hard work, but it's not hard to advance. So the military will tell you exactly what you need to do. You need to do A, B, and C to advance, and if you do it, there's a good chance that you will advance quickly. But a lot of people think, oh, they really don't mean that. Maybe they only really want me to do A and B, but I'm not going to do C, and they don't make rate, and then they don't make rate, and then they want to blame it on everybody. But in all actuality, it's their fault. The Navy has had one particular saying and mantra for my entire time, and I'm sure it's the same today. And if you want to advance quickly, the way to do it is sustain superior performance at sea. That statement has been around for probably over 100 years. So who's going to get advanced first? Somebody that's taking arduous job, or somebody that's sitting on shore duty in San Diego for 12 years. So, when sailors get to the level where they're getting screened by a board, we're looking at everything, and we're looking at the commands that they're currently at and the commands that they've been to make sure they're hitting all their wickets so that they advance. But in my case, I advanced very early, partially because I was at sea most of the time, and even a couple times when I was on shore duty, I put a request in for immediate return to sea duty. So there was a couple commands I went to on shore duty that I wasn't comfortable doing what they wanted me to do, and I just returned to sea duty.
Okay. Well, talk about this getting to be, what does it take to be a master diver in the U.S. Navy? The whole process, when you went from second class to first class to be a master diver.
Well, it first starts at second class dive school. So you get through second class dive school, you're going to go to the fleet for at least 2 to 3 years before you can return to first class dive school, which is mixed gas welding and other various things. And then once you're a first class diver, you're going to either pivot from first class diver maybe over to saturation diver. All right, so we have a group that pivots over to saturation diver, and then they're going to be a saturation diver or a first class diver for 3 to 6 years, and have a couple commands underneath their belt before they can request to go to master diver evaluations. It's not a school, it's an evaluation. They're evaluating you on your professionalism, your leadership, your diving prowess. They're evaluating you on everything, and there's about only a 25% chance that someone will make it out of that school with a master diver pin. When I was in, there was only maybe 80 master divers in the U.S. Navy, but at master chief master diver level, there was less than 20 of us. So
Wow.
it's quite hard. It's quite hard to become a master chief in the Navy. Master chiefs are less than 1%. But if you want to be a master chief master diver in the Navy, I think it's 0.025%
Wow.
to become
Yeah.
that.
And you did it at a relatively young age, in your 30s. But you did tell me one thing. You weren't like, and I can remember my chief, you did PT with your guys. You didn't just like be the guy behind the desk telling them what to do. You were out there. You said you maintained that physical standard up until the end of your career.
That's correct. So,
Yeah.
then in the Navy, when we first came in, there was no Navy PT test. But I don't know, maybe around the 90s, they started the Navy PRT test. But myself and the divers that worked for me, I never let them do the Navy PRT. I said, you're going to take the diver entry level test. And I did that for my entire 30 years. So even after my 30 years, I could pass the PT test for a diver candidate. It's one of those things that if you pass it once, there's a good chance you're always going to be past it, because it's more of a mental thing than it is anything else. And that's just like becoming a diver. There's more of a mental challenge to become a diver or a SEAL, or really anybody in special forces or special teams. It's more mental than it is physical, and a lot of people don't understand that. But all of these special teams in the world, whether they're American teams or teams abroad, they all focus on one thing: getting the candidate to quit. And we don't want quitters. And the era that I grew up in and the family that I was in, my father didn't raise a quitter. So for me to go to dive school, quitting was the last thing on my mind. In fact, I didn't even know quitting was an option. But yeah, it's more of a mental thing than it is a physical thing. So once you can get through that, then you can pretty much accomplish anything.
I think this kind of also segues into your leadership style. And something when we talked previously, you told me that your leadership style is sort of an amalgamation of who you served under and who you've learned from. So what would you describe as your leadership style?
Well, my leadership style is my own, but it is a culmination of all the senior people that I have worked for in the past. And I was told that once, is that, once you become a master chief, master diver, your leadership style is going to be a culmination of the other master divers that you worked for. And I have to agree with that 100%. Even, I worked for some really, really tough people that were very hard to please, and I hated their guts at the time. But later on, I can see that a small piece of them is in my leadership style. The worst you could do as a leader is try to be somebody else. And yeah. It's not easy. It's not easy to get to the level of master chief without being a good leader, though. There's a lot of people looking at you in these boards, and if you are a poor leader, it normally comes out in the boards, and you won't be advanced to master chief.
Between being good at your job, saying diving, but to be good at being a master diver, you actually have to be able to, as you said, your leadership with your guys. Like, you were out there, you weren't just saying, like, I'm telling you what to do, I'm doing it with you. Is that part of it?
That's correct. That's correct. I remember right before I got out one day, we were all going on a command run, and our command run was about 11 miles. It's down to the airport and back. And we were doing it with flak jackets and with plates. And I went out, and a couple of guys were snickering. We were in a big circle, and I said, all right, everybody, we're going to run down. We're not in any hurry. We're going to do it in formation, blah, 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 blah. And a couple of guys are snickering, and one guy snickering was right next to me, and I, as hard as I could, punched him in his chest because I knew he didn't have a fucking plate on. And then everybody started laughing. I said, raise your hand if you're not wearing plates. So about a dozen guys raised their hand. They didn't have plates on. I said, okay, go get your plates and go get an extra set. So I made them run with 2 sets of plates.
Okay. That's actually a big, a lot of people are doing that PT rucking thing now. They're wearing like fake plates to go run. That's a good way to do it.
Leadership is much, much harder than Navy diving. If you're a diver, diving is the fun part, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But leadership is, it's everything. When people ask me now, I'm going to be 65 years old this year. So people ask me now, what'd you do in the Navy? A lot of people expect me to give this big flowery statement about all the dangerous missions that I went on and this, that, and the other. But my answer is this. My job in the Navy was raising young men and young women into responsible adults. That's really what my job was in a nutshell.
It's like being a dad.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah. So in that regard, let's kind of just wrap this up here. Let's just in general, when you look back, what's the proudest thing that you can say? I mean, you talked a little bit about, your biggest job was like training young men and women, but what could you say is the proudest thing about your service that you could say?
I would say, sitting on my desk right here is my flag box, and I was awarded quite a few medals and this, that, and the other. But the medal that I was awarded, which is nowhere near the top of seniority, was for saving somebody's life. So
okay.
If there's something up there that I'm proud of, I'm proud of that.
Okay.
And then the other thing I would say is the best feeling in the world when you retire is that people that worked for you in the past that now are Master Chief, Master Divers attend your retirement. And if you look out and you see 15 or 20 people that worked for you in the past, and now they're the same rank as you, and you're retiring, it makes you feel good that you did something right.
Wow. Okay. Excellent. So I'd like to end this on this note. For this channel, there's divers of different, from commercial divers to tech divers. And this is not just for Navy divers or military divers, but if there's one lesson, or maybe two, that you could write into every diver's brain, what would that be?
First lesson would be when you get yourself in a bad situation, especially underwater, 3 things: stop, think, act. And the last thing I would say is never, ever fucking quit.
Roger that, definitely. Well, Rick, thank you so much for this. I do want to mention that your book is an amazing book. And before we just wrap up here, the book starts, you're out of the Navy, you're living in Australia, you're free diving, spearfishing, and you were attacked by a bull shark. And that attack and subsequently what happened after that was sort of your impetus to write the book. And I'm going to put links to your book where they can get it in the show notes. But just mention that a little bit, because we're going to talk about that shark attack next time we just have another interview here. But just mention that a little bit about what happened and what was the impetus to write your book.
Well, first of all, there was never an impetus to write the book. I suffered a severe shark attack, and there was a high probability that I was going to pass away. And so my wife at the time wanted me to write sort of a memoir to my kids and my grandkids so they would know what I did in the military. So in doing so, it took me about 3 months to write that story. I was writing to my sons and to my granddaughter, all right? I wasn't writing a book. When it was done and over with and edited, everybody said, this is phenomenal. This would be a great book. And then so from the time I started writing, I was finished with that book in 3 months, and I got a traditional contract through a publisher, and within 1 year you could buy it on Amazon. I wasn't actually writing a book. I was writing my memoirs to my kids that turned into a book.
So, and everyone's got sea stories, but you have 32 years of sea stories. So, the name of your book is?
Breathe. And the reason why it's called Breathe is because when I was in a coma, there was one point when I was in a coma near the end where I was woken up, basically. I didn't know where I was at because all I could see was darkness all around me. And but I could hear people's voice. And then all of a sudden I could hear this very obnoxious alarm. And then I heard somebody's voice I didn't know, but it was a female voice saying, he's holding his breath again. He keeps holding his breath, and he's setting the alarm off because he can slow his heart down to less than 40 beats per minute. And then I heard a voice, and that voice was my wife. And she says, he's been doing it his whole life. And then she whispered in my ear, Rick, breathe. And
Wow.
the moment she said breathe, I woke up out of a coma.
Wow. So, that's an amazing story. So, like I said, your book is an amazing story of courage, of service, and thank you for sharing your story here on our channel. It's much appreciated. We're talking here for like 45 minutes, but we could go on for hours, just hearing your stories and what you've done over the years. And I want to just thank you again, Rick. It's been a pleasure to actually meet you and speak with you. Just want to say thanks again for your service and an amazing story. And once again, go in the description, download a copy. Where can they get the book? It's Amazon, the typical places, right?
Oh, in America, it's in every major, but the easiest place is probably Amazon.
Yep. So definitely order a copy of Rick's book. And once again, Rick, thank you very much. Bravo Zulu for everything you've done, and much appreciated.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
To our country, our Navy, and all the best things they stand for.